Hey Editorial hackers, welcome to this week's episode. In this week we are going to be talking about our editorial process and how it has changed with the advent of search intent. Because search intent has changed the way a lot of people need to create content, and it's been a bit of a debate, and you've probably heard me rant quite a lot about it and the fact that you need to create copy-paste content to actually rank. Well, it's not exactly the truth. We have been able to kind of walk around it and find ways to, be better, do better with our content, while at the same time using search intent to be sure our content is going to rank really high. So if you want to create content that ranks high on Google very, very often, I can't tell you every time because that's not how SEO works, but very often, this is going to be useful. I also recommend, if you have freelance writers, if you have full-time writers, to give them this podcast episode to listen, because one, it boosts our downloads and it makes me happy, and two, they will probably be able to pick a bunch of tips to actually do better content for your sites. So I'm not going to tease you more, and let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the Editorial Hacker podcast. As you can hear in my voice, I'm a little bit more energetic than usual on the podcast, mostly because usually we record this at night and I'm quite tired, to be honest. I had a whole day of work. And today we're actually traveling tomorrow to Portugal with Mark to do our quarterly planning and do a bunch of stuff. And therefore we are kind of catching up on podcast and recording in the morning. So I'm pretty excited for that one. But mostly because it's the morning and because I get to ask Mark how it's going again. And that is probably the best part of my week. And I've been doing it like 2 or 3 times this week because we recorded a pretty long podcast. So Mark, for the nth times this week, how's it going?
Still going good. I have 2 interesting updates to give. So this wall behind you, it's going to probably look a different color next time you see me on the show, because it's getting, I'm getting the plaster in and getting some paint. I just got some paint mix yesterday, so it's still going to be super plain. I haven't bought any decorations. I haven't got a pink flamingo for myself yet, but I promise you something, maybe not a pink flamingo, but something along those lines will be making an appearance over there sometime soon.
Yeah, and the second, your background is like British cuisine, very plain.
The second thing I have I want to say is, for anyone who's really confused about why we're doing our quarterly planning in mid-February, we don't run on normal quarters. We run them like halfway through the quarter, just for reasons. So yeah.
Yeah, because it's cheaper, because all the corporations book at the right dates and we just book after.
It's really, we just started doing it one mid-November once and then decided, all right, well, we just better do it every 3 months. So
yeah, well, it's fine. It's like, I'm just excited to go to Portugal, to be honest. That's going to be exciting. But yeah, actually, you got to tell people the truth about your background. Really, it's a green screen and you have like all golden house behind it, and then you just put a plain background.
So that's where all my sports cars live,
Yeah, exactly. Just to not brag. We went through extensive technical changes just for that, so that you put that. It's just a JPEG, really. Anyway, let's talk about today's podcast. And today's podcast is going to be breaking down our editorial process. And I think it's we've done that in the past, but that was before search intent was so big. That was before a lot of things changed. And overall, we have personally progressed and figured new stuff out, etc. So I thought it would be an interesting one to anyone who is really producing content on their site. And we're just going to make a sequential podcast again. So we're going to be step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. and share kind of like practical tips for each one and how we do things. And actually, it's like I was pleased because I have several examples of like YouTube videos that kind of fit in that process that I've done. I'm like, finally, I start to have actually a little bit of a YouTube backlog of stuff I've put there that people can go check for more details. So we will be quoting them in time. But I think you wanted to start with what has changed in content.
Yeah, so just a few years ago, you could produce, let's say like a decent article that was unique, and you could kind of brute force your way to the top of the SERPs with good SEO and a lot of link building. But that's kind of changed over the last couple of years with the advent of search intent. So if you Google any popular commercial or even info query these days, you tend to find that a lot of the results are pretty similar. They have a similar structure, and this is especially true for any affiliate reviews or roundup reviews. So what's going on here? Like, is everyone just producing the same thing? How do we stand out? And how do we make content in such a way that we're actually going to be able to rank? So there's a lot of nuance to it, and it's not just, pick a keyword, write about it, and post it anymore, which it kind of was not so long ago. So that's what today's podcast, I guess, is all about. It's like the nuance behind every step of that. So we've made this into an 11-step process. And yeah, going to share
Sounds
that
like
with you.
Some kind of weird sect or something, like an 11-step plan to lose weight or something. Like
Wow,
it's pretty much that.
That's what
11 steps. 11 steps to rank #1 on Google, guys. Let's get started. Let's just bring the hype up. But yeah, it's our answer to search intent, and it's kind of like, it's been a while now. It's been refined. It's like people often, like I read discussions on Reddit and stuff, and people are like, oh, they're quite slow to adapt, etc. Well, we're not necessarily slow to do these things, but we're slow to talk about them because we like to have some experience behind us. Like the process we're going to talk about has produced hundreds of articles now, and even probably like getting to thousands. And it's like we are confident in it, and I don't like talking about something I've been doing for a week or 2 weeks. And so that's why often it takes time for us to talk about these things, because we refine them, explore things, observe what people do, talk to people, and eventually we talk about it when we're like, okay, that's pretty good. And so let's get started with the first step. And the first step when you create content is to not start writing. The first step is to Google the keywords that you want to rank for. And the first thing to do is understand the high level of the search intent, which is understand what format of article Google is looking for. Really, if you don't match the format of article Google wants for a query, it's still possible to rank, but it's very rare. Like you find 80% plus of the result of any keyword will have the same format, whether it's a list post, a step-by-step post, a recipe, a review, whatever it is, a roundup review, a list, that kind of stuff. You will have to match that format, otherwise you're really reducing your chances massively. It doesn't mean you can't rank, but it's much, much lower.
Sometimes for very low competition keywords where not less than 10 people have actually targeted it with a specific post, you will see a list post, a longer question post type format, and it will vary a bit more. But that's when there's nothing else that fits perfectly. So if you're in that situation, look for the articles or the pages which are specifically targeting that keyword. They've got it in the title. That's what the content's about. And then
another thing that I like to do. First of all, when you Google that query, you kind of want to like click on most of the results and identify the best pages. So like usually it's kind of a subjective thing. It's like which one is actually like answering the query the best, and do I like the most, and would I be happy to find if I was searching for that topic. And that's how you pick the competitors to model after. You first pick like the pages that just do the best job at being an answer to a query. But also what I like to do is I like to look at the domain metrics. So I tend to have the Ahrefs extension when I Google stuff. So you see all the Ahrefs metrics in Google. And I'm looking for the pages that have the lowest domain metrics. So lowest link metrics, both on the domain level. So the DR should be like, what is the lowest DR that's ranking top 5, for example? And also on the page level, right? Which pages have like lowish domain rating and not too many links, and are still ranking quite well. Because what it's telling me is that this page is not ranking because of all the links that page has. It's ranking because Google likes what's on the page. And since I'm here to create content, I want to match the people who do the best job at that. And so when I pick the pages I want to model after, I pick the pages that I subjectively believe are doing the best job, combined with the pages with the lowest link metrics, both on the domain level and on the page level. And so that you kind of like make a selection of like 3-4 pages, and you'll just like take note of these URLs, and they are going to be kind of like your North Star for the content you want to create. And your goal is going to be not to just copy them, but to do something better than them. But to match them to then after outdo them, you first need to make sure you take the best out of each page. And that's what we're going to be attempting to do here. During that step, I also like to consolidate my keyword selection. So what I mean is that a given page doesn't just rank for one keyword and that's it. Pages rank for hundreds of keywords, and Google kind of like matches keywords together. So for example, if you Google best vacuum cleaner and you Google easy to use vacuum cleaner, you will find that actually the best vacuum cleaner pages rank for easy to use vacuum cleaner, right? And it's like you don't need to create 2 pages. You can target this query with the same page, these 2 queries with the same page. And so I like to get to kind of like write down the spectrum of keywords I can target with the 1 page of content that I'm going to create. There's 2 reasons for that. The first one is you get to, let's say you're trying to rank for best vacuum cleaner, for example. It's a very hard query to rank for. you're unlikely to rank for it at the beginning, but easy to use vacuum cleaner might be a lot easier to rank for. So you might want to optimize your content for easy to use vacuum cleaner, build authority, build some links to it, because there's no way you will rank for best vacuum cleaner without links to page. And then eventually, when the page has enough authority, switch it to best vacuum cleaner and keep both keywords basically. And so like I like to understand that and kind of like have a strategy for my page, maybe the easy keyword to rank for it with it at the beginning, and eventually transition and pivot to the more difficult keywords that would bring more traffic and make me more money. So that's the time where I'm thinking about this as I'm looking at these things. I'm trying to understand like what percentage of pages rank for easy to use vacuum cleaner, that rank for best vacuum cleaner, how related are the queries, that kind of stuff, and decide of a path basically. So that's the first step of creating content. It doesn't sound like you're creating much content, but that's really that understanding in your head is very important.
It is really important to do that up front, because it makes the next part so much easier as well. Because once we've done that analysis, we're then going to map out every article that we've chosen as part of our comparison, and we're going to put it into, Gael likes to use a Google Sheet, and then we're going to say, like, let's say,
it's a very specific thing to me, using Google Sheets.
Well, it's good because you have all these columns, right? And you can compare the structure of the article. So you take all the H2s, maybe some of the H3s as well, depending, but all the important sections, and you label them. And because different articles have different names for sections, you might have like a buying guide or a how to pick a vacuum cleaner, whatever it is. What you can do is you can actually color code in Excel those different sections. So you can see, okay, this one has the buying guide at the top, this one has the buying guide down here, but they both have it, or all of these articles have it, but this one doesn't. And you really build up a visual picture of the structure of each article. And then you can look at the whole sheet and then say, okay, what are the important sections which I must have, which is likely to be the sections which appear in multiple or all of the articles.
Yeah, it means Google wants them, right? If all the pages that rank have them, it's like, if you don't have this, you probably won't rank, so you should have them.
And then occasionally you'll see one article which is just, you feel is doing a really good job because they've had this extra section. You think, oh, that's a good idea. And then you can take that and you can include that in yours as well. So it really just gives you an overview of everything to put in, and it makes it easy for you to select which sections you want to do. Now, once you have an idea...
I just want to say, I did a YouTube video where I show an example of that in this revival content. So we'll put a link and you guys can check. But you can see an example of that exact spreadsheet in one of these videos. And I'm pretty sure the case study page I took now ranks top 3 on Google, actually, in that video. So it shows you it works, basically.
So what we want to do is we want to take the best bits, the most common bits, and anything that you think is missing that would make an even better article. And then we want to put that into an initial structure. And what we use for that is a tool called Dynalist, which is basically just a bullet point tool. You can't do anything except make bullet points, indent them and stuff. And that forces you to not turn it in or not start writing. And you can kind of move things around very easily. It's a free tool as well. So check that out. It's also featured in that video. So that's kind of what we use. And the goal for that section is to create that initial Dynalist structure of what our article is going to look like. That's all we have to do. We don't have to figure out the detail or anything. That comes next. And
it's just the H2s and H3s. You don't really go deeper yet. And what I like about this is like, because you're taking like 3 to 5 inspiration websites, you're not just a carbon copy of like one article, which a lot of people do, right? You find in the selves, like people just find one article and it's just lazy and it just copy that one. The fact that you take multiple inspirations kind of help you develop something a bit unique. You take that bit from the article, that other bit from this article, that was cool, mixed with like the sections they all have in common so that you match your search intent. And you're able to come with something that's a little more refined than just like picking a random article and just copy pasting exactly what they did, which a lot of people do. It works to some extent, but I think you're kind of missing. Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't feel good running our sites that way. Like I don't like the idea of just copying someone directly exactly. But at the same time, you got to understand that if Google's looking for these sections, you need to have them. So, and overall, you get better content, you know?
That is ultimately what development is, and what, there's not, someone said once, there's no such thing as a new idea. It's just things built on other ideas.
Yeah.
So that's what you're doing here. You're taking what's working, you're taking what you know is going to match the search intent, what Google is telling you they want, and then you're making something better. And that's the thing, make it better. Don't just do the same. Because if you try and imitate, you're not
make it better, but you don't start from scratch as well. It's kind of like that hybrid thing where it's like you are conscious of what is needed and you're understanding that Google will reward articles that are structured that way, but you try to go a bit deeper. And that's kind of the point of the next step, actually, which is that's when you're going to like spend more time reading the articles, etc. But the point is going to take each subheading that you've put in your Dynalist and research it as if it was its own article almost, but still be conscious of like what the whole article is. And that's when you can go a little bit deeper than just copying what people have done. You can actually research these topics on like YouTube videos. You can go on Reddit and see what people say. You can read, if you're talking about products and doing product reviews, like go and read the reviews on Amazon for the products and like see what people say about it. Do they like it? Do they not like it? And you'll find a lot of points that are not mentioned on the articles that are ranking on Google. And it's kind of like that thing where you create value by adding new information while still matching the search intent structure that is expected. And that's how you bring originality to content these days while being constrained by Google in terms of subtopics and all that stuff, etc. That's this phase of research. So, and usually when you do that research, you go back to your Dynalist where you only had your headline structure and you add the points you want. I tend to, for each point I want to make in the article, for each subsection, I make a point in Dynalist, usually like 5-6 words, maybe a link or something like this, just so that when I'm going to be writing my article, I can refer to these things. And I think, like a lot of people complain about having fluffy content. That's because this phase is not done right. If you have done this phase right and you have like 4 or 5 bullet points per subheading on your article. So your Dynalist is pretty big. I think we can probably show some examples on screen as we're talking about this. And then you will just write like a couple of sentences per, like 2, 3, 4 sentences per bullet point. Then that's your article, and it's like this article is fully packed with facts and it's not fluffy. It's not just repeating the same thing all again and again. And that's this phase. Like, actually, I really want people who have editorial teams to give this podcast to their writers. So if you're like, go ahead, give this podcast to your writers and focus, tell them to focus on that, because if you're struggling with fluffy content, that is this section here. And the way you build your Dynalist, that is the reason why you have fluffy content. So that's how I would do, and go past the SERPs so that you create something a bit more original while being very likely to rank.
So I think the key thing with the research phase specifically is giving people one goal to focus on. And that's really to just like dump in all of the thoughts and all of the cool things you find. Then you can have a separate phase after that where you sort of tweak and finalize the full structure. And you don't, when you're doing all this research, you really just want to be like throwing it in there. And then I think later come through and organize it. And that would be the sort of like full structure phase where you get all your H2, 3, 4, 5 if you're using them. You have every point you want to make in a bullet point. It could be messy. You're not writing at this phase yet, but you have every point you want to make under every heading. And then you go even further, and any extra resource you want, any quotes, any stats, if you need to link to someone, say this person says this, or according to users, they had this problem with the battery or something like that. Get those quotes, get those links, get those references. Graphics as well, if you're thinking of getting anything made up specifically for the article, like illustrations. We're a big fan of going old school on this. So literally a pen and paper. Yeah, remember
and
those
take
things?
Take a photo of it.
Just sketch something out. And honestly, like we're terrible at this. We draw like stick men pointing to
I'll
a
give
chart
examples to Maxime as well to put on the podcast, because it's like it's pretty funny. Some of my
so maybe he can, like, with the magic of video editing, we can have like a before and an after. And we can sort of compare them that way, and you can see. But it's important to start thinking about these things at this stage. Because that can take a little bit of time to produce as well. And it can be really important to illustrate certain points.
Yeah, and when you do it in Dynalist, you can drag and drop things all around all the time. So it's like, don't worry about dumping something in the wrong place. And then once you're done with your research phase, you probably have this reorganization phase where you just like move things around. Maybe, this heading would be better here, etc. Now that you have the information, that's the time when you can do that. So don't worry about dumping first and then organizing after. That's pretty much that research phase. Before you jump into the writing,
it's quite normal when you're doing the full structure that you're questioning you're questioning your very existence. You think, is this really the right way to do it? Wouldn't it make better doing it this way? And you go back and forth and back and forth, having those debates with yourself or with your team while you're doing the structure will just make the writing phase so easy and so painless. Like all of the hard work is up until this point. So when we get to the actual writing phase, normally how writers do it is this is when they do all the research. They start writing and think, I need to find out about like the battery life of this cordless vacuum cleaner. So I'll go research that. But because you've done it all before, you have all that information, all that data, everything you want to quote. You've even got your images starting to be made. You literally just fill in the blanks and start writing. And it's
another thing as well is if you researched your subheadings and not your main topic, it makes your article more precise. So for example, like as I said, like if you mention the battery life, if you're really digging into a battery life and like digging like, how big is the capacity of the battery? How many watts per hour can the battery take when it charges? Does it charge slow? Does it charge fast? Like you're not asking the question of like, I don't know, let's say it was a drone review. Like, let's say you were reviewing a DJI Mavic Air 2 or something. So it's like, you're not really asking the question of like, is this a good drone? You're asking like, what is the battery life? Like, how long does it take to charge? And that's because most people, when they just research Mavic Air 2 review. And then it's like the battery life is such a small topic and it's like most people just kind of brushed over. You're not going to get a lot of information. But if you kind of change your perspective of your research on just that subheading as if it was its own article, you're going to dig out a lot more interesting facts, and that's what will make your article stand out, actually. So, have that opinion, like diverge away from your main topic to your subheadings as if they were single articles.
The order of writing your article is also very important. So basically, do your intro last. Start after your intro finishes. And just start in the body, go through it. You should probably be writing a couple, 2-3 sentences per bullet point or per point that you have on your Dynalist. And depends on your style. We're big advocates of very short paragraphs. Gael sometimes does 2-word paragraphs. If you've read any of his emails, you can go to authorityhacker.com/subscribe to get those every week. But in terms of blog posts, we really do write very, very short, succinct sentences and it's paragraphs, and it's fine to have single sentence paragraphs and several of them in a row. Even if you keep 1 point per paragraph, it just makes it easier to read as well. And that's really it. There's not too much complexity around the body because you've done all this work before. When it comes to the outro and the intro, we'll get to it as well. These are 2 point areas which people often fail at because even if they write a really good article and the intro sucks and the outro sucks, it kind of kills it. The biggest problem that people have is they make it too long. They write 100 words or 150 words and they're kind of repeating themselves or especially when it comes to the intro, it's just super fluffy and just you can look at it and you think, this is just another half-assed SEO article that why am I going to read this? Especially in these days where people have such short attention spans. You don't need to beat around the bush too much. When it comes to the outro, just wrap up really quickly, briefly summarize what you want to do and have a CTA in there. It doesn't matter if it's an affiliate article, then obviously you're going to link to the product. If it's an info article and they finish reading, what are they supposed to do next? Most likely you have another info article or another article that you...
opt into your list. Opt into your email list.
Yeah, or if you sell products, then maybe push them towards that as well. But don't just finish it off and say, thanks for reading, goodbye. You want to keep them. You've earned their attention. You want to keep them on your site, take them to another page. And think of that. Now, when it comes to intros, we have slightly differing opinions about this sometimes. So do you want to explain your thoughts on this first?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the way I write intros really comes from the way I went through school. Like I feel like now it's like it's flashing back and like the image becomes black and white and everything. It's like, but we used to write a lot. Like French education system makes you write a lot. Like we were having like 4-hour dissertations to write on Saturday mornings and stuff. Like it was like pretty intense. But like the way they forced us to write intros, or you would not pass, was write a problematic. So a problematic would be defining the problem you want to answer in your article. So for example, is a DJI Mavic Air 2 worth your money, or can you put the same amount of money somewhere else? What are its shortcomings, and what is it shining over the competition? Like you define the questions you want to ask in your introduction, so that there's a how would I say? There's a goal to your article, right? If I answer these questions, it's pretty good. And usually you would also, before you expose your problematic, you would start the very beginning of your intro, either quoting a statistic. So for example, I'd be like, well, DJI is the biggest drone manufacturer in the world. They actually have sold over 6 million drones just in the past quarter. And everyone's just like fighting to get theirs. They're actually out of stock. Now, the new DJI Mavic Air 2 just came out. Is it a worthy successor of the previous DJI Mavic Air? Does it fix the shortcomings? And has the competition heated up and caught up with them? Or is DJI still the king of the industry? That would be something like I would write like this. You could either do that, or you could start, if you don't have stats, you can start with a short personal story around that. So it would be maybe like, when the first DJI Mavic came out, I was very excited because it was much smaller than the previous Phantom 4 that was really big and heavy and you needed a whole backpack, whereas this would fit in your pocket. But I never ended up using it because this and this and this. The DJI Mavic Air 2 just came out, and it has this feature and this feature that addresses my issue. Is it now a worthy drone for everyone to buy, or is it still a very enthusiast market that is trying to go mainstream? And then that would be my intro, something. So that, like, you basically always ask a question and you start with a stat or with a short personal story that makes people interested or makes people react. You know?
I think the power in that is that you're making it more about you, the author, and people follow people. People like to hear what people have to say rather than just this like generic faceless review on some unknown third-party website. What I like to do that's slightly different is to actually answer the question straight away. So is it good? Yes or no? And briefly in one sentence say why. So the DJI Mavic is a great drone because it has 30-minute battery life, which is 30% more than its closest competitor for half the price. Or I'm just making that up, but whatever it is. Yeah. Say something like that. It's a lot easier to do that in commercial content though than info content sometimes. But I like to do that because I'm a skim reader, so I don't read everything word for word when I'm reading a 2,000 word review. I look for the key, like the juicy points, like what are the things I want to get out of it. I scroll, I sometimes go up and down, and my attention's caught by all the bullet points and images and headings and stuff. So that's how I consume content, and a lot of people are the same. So that's why I like to start it off by giving the answer. And it also gives you in commercial content the opportunity to link to the product as well. And sometimes people will be like, this is a great product because here's the link, click, buy. Okay, you can make your commission on that.
I agree on that. It's funny, actually, one thing that's revealing is actually the way you're describing is the way you're taught to write in the Anglo-Saxon culture. And the way I'm describing is the way we're taught to write in the French culture. Because when I did my studies...
Isn't Anglo-Saxon French originally? Like, doesn't that word like...
Probably, it might be.
I think the Saxons were from France and they came to England.
Yeah, but then they invaded each other a million times, and it was just like. But anyway, like I switched from the French education system to the American one when I did my studies in university, and so the way we had to write, I had to swap to the way you're describing. The way I counter that is that I make my subheadings answer. Like you can read the article with just reading the subheadings. I think a really good example of that work on subheadings is actually the Authority System sales page. You can go check on authority.com/system. You can pretty much read the sales page without reading any of the small content, just reading the headlines and understand what's going on here. So I kind of like counter that more open-ended intros that don't give you the answer with the fact that you can just scroll down and read the headlines and just kind of get your answer. Like, I'd be like, Mavic Air 2 has 28-minute battery life. It's like beats the competition by 10 minutes. A battery life beats like something like this, so that you don't have to read the whole section below. You can just get your answers through that. But I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it just depends on, it depends how talented you are at executing them, I believe. Both ways can work, but you need to do it well. So for example, a problem we have is I try to tell some of our writers sometimes to do the personal stories thing, but they go way too far. Like when I write personal story, it's like 3-4 lines, it's really, really short. And then I just jump into my topic. Otherwise, it's like story of my life, not really the article, and writers tend to like literally write like a whole, like 2 paragraphs of like a whole story. And it's like, I'm like, well, you've lost me. I came for this page about this. And now you're just telling me that story about your grandma, and I don't really care, And it's like, so it's like you've got to know how to do it really well. I think one that is pretty good is the site architecture on Auto-Hacker. I give these examples on Auto-Hacker because I wrote them, But like the site architecture intro,
we'll link it here. But we'll link it here.
Yeah,
by the way.
I think we can even show it. But like literally, the personal story is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 10 words, right? It just says, poor website architecture is like a messy desktop. It's unbearable. And then I put a screenshot of like a horrible desktop with millions of images and files, etc. And then I say, but you shouldn't try to organize your SEO structure for me. You should do it for your rankings. And I just show the rankings going up on the site that we fixed, basically. And it's like, that is how short you can make a personal story. It's like you start with something that's completely unrelated, a messy desktop. But like it's just I make the analogy with the messy site structure and I jump back right in the topic right away. Like I don't spend too much time telling people why messy desktops are annoying, etc. I'm just using an image to illustrate, people get it, and then just let's get on to the topic. So you can do these things, but it's all about execution. I think this one is like one of the most brief versions of that,
Okay, I think we should move on to editing because we could probably do a whole podcast on article intros if we really wanted to, and maybe we will at some point in the future. But to get through the rest of the points, the next section is editing, and there's really 2 types of editing. There's the technical spelling and grammar type editing, which, I mean, to be honest, you can do a lot, or you'll get a lot just typing in Google Docs or Word, like the spell checker will pick stuff up. But there are better tools like Hemingway app and Grammarly, which address things which that's not going to pick up, such as, is it easy to read? Is a sentence way too long? We see a lot of like university, college graduates who have been writing longer dissertations in a more kind of academic way. When they come to write for the web, their sentence structure is way too long. You stick it in Hemingway app and it's all red and yellow and the sentences are too long. So they need to learn to shorten the sentences. If you have more than one comma in a sentence, really think, is this necessary? Can this be 2 sentences? Can this even be more paragraphs? I know you've been using Grammarly a lot to fix certain things. Yeah. What do you like most about it?
I like that it's not just about fixing grammar. It's like it identifies sentences that are too long. It fixes like proper comma issues. It identifies when you repeat the same words all the time, which like for non-native speakers is very common. It like proposes synonyms, for example, to make the vocabulary more rich. You can do the settings, like you can say like, usually I always set it to like casual and like the lowest level of reading pretty much. And it really helps me like break down sentences, like long sentences into multiple sentences, etc. It's expensive. I mean, it's $144 per year.
What's the difference between the free version and the paid version then?
So the free version is basically a glorified spell checker from Microsoft Word, and then Grammarly Premium literally has like pretty much AI writing in there, right? So it rewrites your sentences as well for you quite often. So quite often, I click on a suggestion, and they literally have rewritten the sentence for me, broken it down in 2 sentences, etc. And I just click accept, and it's done, And it saves me a lot of time. Like it makes the editing fast. Like let's say I'm like putting a newsletter into that. Like it's only a 5-minute process to go through like 800, 900, 1,000 words or something. And yeah, it's pretty good. There's 2 things that are annoying. I mean, first thing, the premium also has the duplicate checker. So you can check for plagiarism if your writers give you copy-pasted content, which can happen. Quite nice. And it works just as well as Copyscape. So it's like, if you were already spending money on a duplicate checker tool, maybe you can allocate that budget to Grammarly, and then it's not as bad, the price. But the problem is that most functions do not work. They don't all work with the Chrome plugin. So there's a Chrome plugin, and you can edit your stuff in like Google Docs, for example, if you're writing, and get Grammarly suggestions right there. But they don't have as many as if you go in the app. So you often need to, like, if you want the full power of the application, you need to copy your content from Google Docs, put it in Grammarly, then you get the full suggestion and bring it back to Google Docs. And that's a little annoying. I really wish the Chrome extension did everything, and that would be totally worth it. But if you're not a native speaker and you want to create your own content, I think it's like, I'll go as far as saying this is almost like an AI writing tool. Like, it's becoming that. I can see Grammarly is going to become like a Jarvis one day, like this is the direction of the company. And it's like, there's already a little bit of that. I'm not
or Jasper as they're going by now. They're changing their name for the third time, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean, in 3 months is going to be another name, so it's like, it's going to be outdated fast, this podcast. But yeah, overall, I really, really like it. I don't think it's cheap. I think $99 a year would be fair. This is a little expensive, I think, but I wouldn't work without it. If you can afford it, it's pretty good.
One other strategy you can use for the technical editing side is just to read your article, but speak it aloud. Often when you're reading things, you read what you want to see there, and you can miss things which you're missing. Or again, when you have these situations where you're saying the start of two sentences is the same, or there's a lot of word repetition, you'll pick those up much, much quicker if you're speaking the article. So that can be a good strategy, and it's free as well. The other type of editing you have is the more sort of subjective editing. So you want to look through it and really ask yourself, does this communicate well to the typical person searching for this? So you have to put yourself in the mindset of someone who's searching for how long does a DJI Mavic battery last for? And what do they know? What do they not know? And then look to see if your article presumes the right things. Because if you start your article by saying a DJI Mavic is a drone that does X, Y, Z, I mean, they already know that stuff. So you really have to be careful that you're not preaching to the choir here and telling them what they already know.
Yeah, and you need to go a little bit in the details. Like, if I read a review that talks about battery life, I expect them to talk about weather conditions, whether that's the wind, the temperature as well matters a lot for batteries, as people who have electric vehicles probably know. Things like that, like, and, altitude, things like that, because the air gets thinner as you get higher. So the battery needs, you would expect that it goes to that level of detail if you're actually someone who is interested in that topic. And I'll be honest, most articles don't. And so that's one of these things that you can go and pick up, like on Reddit, or YouTube videos often do a better job at talking about these very precise things. So that's your research. Like, that's going back to your research, and that's how you go the extra mile. That's how you make better content than everyone while matching search intent. Like, I've often been complaining about that, but that's how you do this, I
think so. Reddit is great because people just give their unfiltered opinion, and you get to the meat and bones of a topic. YouTube is also good sometimes because the editorial barrier and the effort people put in to create content for YouTube is much higher than it is on social media or writing a blog post. And typically people will get torn apart if they're speaking shit, whereas that doesn't really happen on blog posts to the same extent.
Yeah.
So you can often, not always, but often rely on the content better for
the comments on the YouTube videos as well. Like, if you want to find discussions about topics, comments on YouTube are one of the most active community online. Like, I would say it's probably first or second.
There's a lot of shit in there, but there are some.
You
gems
can dig
as well.
some stuff, yeah, exactly. Like, you obviously need to go through this, but that's the research phase basically. Okay, so once you've done the editing, we can talk about Surfer and kind of like on-page tools now. I think it's kind of the time. We use Surfer SEO, we use the content editor, and we use the Chrome plugin with it. So we write in Google Docs, and we see the suggestions on the right with Surfer telling us the keywords. And usually you kind of like, as you write, you kind of like check on the right. There's like a filtering function if you're writing something specific, and you add your keywords as you go and try to go as high as you possibly can, right? That's usually how we do that. I actually made another YouTube video, as I said, I have done several I can mention in this podcast, on creating the perfect SEO editor. So I mentioned how we use it a little bit deeper there. But that's how we use this tool, we use Surfer, but you could be using Frase, for example, it's pretty good, and a few others. Surfer is not the only one in town anymore. That's how we do that. And then after that, after we're done writing, we move things to the editing. So that's when we copy paste in Grammarly, do all these things, etc. And I bring it back to Google Doc quite often. And then we do kind of like one last layer of checking that we didn't de-optimize the article as we did the editing. And then that's pretty much how we use on-page tools here. And then we make sure people will want me to give a score. Usually we make sure our articles are above 66, so kind of like in the green for Surfer. I know a lot of people obsess over getting like the 100 score or 90, etc. Like it's quite often our articles get to like 75, 80, but like these tools are not Google. I want to say like a lot of writers focus on that as well. And it's kind of like Ahrefs metrics. Like DR is not Google as well. And Google is much more sophisticated than all of these tools. These are merely guidelines. And so like, as long as you're kind of in the green, you are good. You don't need to obsess over being the perfect score. You will probably not rank higher. You're better off creating a second article that is in the green as well than obsessing over making that one article perfect. Just throw it in there, publish it, see where you rank, and then tweak it after if you want, if you don't rank as high as you expected. But often this is not really going to be the deciding factor of whether you're doing well or not. Things like site structure, internal links, etc. will matter more than you having the perfect score on these tools. So they're useful, but don't go overboard like many people do these days. It's kind of like, I'm like, yeah, you don't get it. Like I see a lot of people, posting the screenshots on the Surfer group or something, like, oh my God, 99, etc. I'm like, yeah, that you wasted probably a couple
There's diminishing
hours
returns, extreme diminishing returns there for sure.
Yeah. I like it, and we use it, but you need to take all these tools, like they're all extremely vague data, and that's how you need to take it. They're guidelines.
Yeah. So the important thing there though is use Surfer a little bit as you're writing. Don't obsess over it there. After you've done the editing, because remember when you do the editing, a lot of the text is going to change, and you may have to redo certain sections. You might end up de-optimizing. So that's why you have a second proper run through of Surfer and take it to how far you want it at that point. Now after we've done that, we can talk about images if you want. So if you've been working with an illustrator or a designer, then you probably got them. You stick them in the article at this point. It's not a big deal. A lot of the time, though, you'll want to find your own images using something like Unsplash or Pexels, which are free stock image tools. They're okay.
They're pretty good. That's okay. Like for stock images, it's okay. But stock images are stock images,
Yeah. So back in the day, not too long ago, people would just find, if they were doing a list post of 10 things, they stick 10 stock images in there and call it a day. Okay, we got some images, and you used to find a lot of articles using the same images, and they just weren't particularly good, and they looked a bit off from each other because they're all taken in different light conditions and things like that. You can actually use image editing tools like Canva, or what was the other free one that was really good? You could apply a filter to it. I mean, I guess any image editing tool.
Canva has a free tier where you can do that. So
does it? Okay. Yeah. So if you apply the same filter to every image, you can sometimes make them look just a little bit more consistent, and it can add this just subtle effect to
it's like
branding of your site.
Images.
Yeah. If you want to go,
I just want to say I use another tool. I use Pixelmator Pro. If you have a Mac, it's great. It's 35 euros, but for life, you pay once, no subscription or not. So it's pretty good. It's like 80% of Photoshop, but 80% easier to use,
Yeah.
And if you have a Mac, it's a cool, and you don't want to add another subscription, because I always try to find alternatives that don't have subscriptions for people, because that is kind of like the ultimate profit drainer, is
that's how they get you.
Too many subscriptions. Pixelmator Pro is excellent. They have a good YouTube channel where you can learn how to use it as well. And you will probably need to, it's a little bit less intuitive than Canva, but not a lot. You can actually do better stuff with it. So most of the stuff we do, I do that.
And this is also a good time to think about your headline image or featured image that you want to use. This is going to be what's displayed in your blog feed or on your homepage or category page, wherever that's being pulled, but also when your article is being shared on social, or sometimes at the top of the article if you do it that way. And it can simply be an image from your article, and you can write some text on it and call it a day. It doesn't have to be too complicated. We talked about Unsplash and Pexels as the free stock image sites. You can also use paid ones. So there's DepositPhotos, which is kind of like the value option. It has a lot of images in there,
AppSumo
and it's pretty cheap. I don't think AppSumo run it. They have AppSumo. They have AppSumo promotions, but it's not owned by AppSumo. Yeah.
No, it's not. But like the value way to get stock images is wait for that once or twice promo per year on AppSumo, buy a bunch of credit, and then it's like it's like a third of the price that you would pay normally. It's like much cheaper.
We've still got credits from 5 years ago or whatever when they
because we bought so many. Yeah. And so like a lot of people in the H Pro community, or like every time this deal comes up, they just share it on the group. Everyone buys a bunch, and then that's how you get the best value for stock images. And then it's a one-off payment. You buy a lot of credits, and you can fill your website with images, and it's okay. Like it still looks like stock photos. I would still recommend editing them a bit, etc. But as far as value per dollar, it's probably one of the best for paid stock photos. And you have Shutterstock, right? Which is like the high end. But to be honest, I don't think most people listening to this podcast will use Shutterstock. It's just expensive for
it's really expensive. Yeah.
I would not recommend people do that. My recommendation is use the free ones and grab some DepositPhotos deal when they come up. And if you have a Mac, buy Pixelmator Pro, and then you have 0 subscriptions for your images. You just buy one-off credits for the cheapest on AppSumo and use the free ones and edit them for, not for free, but for that one-time fee. Like I bought this tool like 5 years ago now, and I'm still using it and I'm still on it. So it's like, that's my recommendation in terms of value for creating your images while still doing okay, basically. Go ahead.
So the next thing I want to talk about is links. So there's 2 considerations here, internal and external links. So when you are, you obviously haven't published the article yet, so you can't link to it yet because the URL doesn't exist, or it would be a 404. We'll get to that at the end when we publish the article. But when you're creating your article at this point, you want to find opportunities to link out from this article to other articles on your site. So there's a couple ways to do that. You should ideally have a target list of top targets, pages that you want to push on your site, and the more internal links that you can push to those, then the better. Aside from that, you can go to Google and search for, put in their site :yourdomain.com, and then just a keyword. And that's just going to search on your site, and it's going to find all of the results to do with batteries or drones or whatever.
That's the thing. Don't search for your main keyword though. Search for subtopics that you're talking about. So if you're talking about battery life, for example, search for that. Search for battery life, things like that, etc., and look for articles. And what I like about that tactic is that Google gives you the pages they deem the most relevant for this, which means like you get a layer of the algorithm that tells you which pages should be linked here more than like a WordPress search, which is absolutely terrible, or something like this. And then the last one I think is the Google Doc internal link trick. So actually, you can Google from Google Docs, which is really powerful. You can select a word you want to link, and for example, I'll be typing authority hacker site architecture, and it will show me like that page, and I can click and it will add the link actually. So that works pretty well. I wanted to say as well about rewriting to add internal links. So very often when I want to push a page, I often I re-edit my article to bring up slightly that topic so that I have an opportunity to link, or I edit the article to have the exact anchor text of the keyword I'm trying to rank the page I'm linking to for, so that you boost that page further by giving extra relevancy. But that's how you do your internal linking. That I don't want to make a lot of people use plugins these days to do internal links. We don't actually. We tried Link Whisper. It's okay. Like if you want to use it, it's fine. But we like to have this kind of deliberate decision of how we internal link, because I think sometimes people internal link too much to not that useful pages. And what it does, it kind of dissolves the page rank across too many pages. It doesn't make as much of an impact. So having internal links is good, but I like to have that deliberate intention from the SEO person to do that rather than just automate it with a plugin. But I mean, Link Whisper works fine if you want to use it, and it's fine. But then you would do it later after you published, not now. Upload. So do you want to do it or should I do it?
You do this one.
Okay, so if you're doing simple uploads, very simple articles, just like images and text, you can even use automated tools like Wordable to like basically transfer a Google Doc to your WordPress site. It works pretty well.
Why is that better than just copy pasting it?
Because it uploads the images to the media library on WordPress instead of hot linking to. Otherwise, you need to re-upload your images. Because when you copy paste, it will link to the Google Doc version of the image. It will not upload the image.
Right. Okay.
Which means that like you delete the Google Doc and all your images break. So like it will. If you want to save some time, you can do that, or you can just copy paste and then re-upload the images and redo. Depends how many images you have, right? It really depends. But Gutenberg handles copy paste a lot better than the classic editor. So if you are doing that, it's okay. You can add CTA, styling, boxes, etc. That's the time when you do that. We use GeneratePress for that now on all our sites. Now that we switch to Hacker, all our sites are now off page builders and using that. You write your title tag at this point as well. So again, you want your main keyword on top. I made a whole article on that as well. We've done data studies on that, but you want a keyword at the beginning. You might want to, like, that's when, when you were selecting the path of your page, maybe you picked a lower competition keyword at first. You might want to optimize for this one and write your title tag later when you're going to re-optimize for the bigger one, like Pest Vacuum Cleaner. So write your title tag, write your meta description, write all of that. And then if we are uploading the images ourselves, we do image optimization at that point as well. So we compress them, like even though we're using either Bunny Optimizer or NitroPack, depending on the sites, which have image optimization things, we still compress the images to be quite small using Pixelmator Pro as well. We use that tool. It just has an export for the web, and you have all the features, and often you can cut the image size in half or in a third or something. It looks the same. It helps a lot. And then after that, your image optimization system will take over. We create a new folder for the media. We use a plugin called WP Media Folder, which kind of like transform, the media library in WordPress. Normally it's just like you throw your stuff in and you just get a giant list and that's it. Well, this allows you to create folders, etc. So we create one folder per post, and it allows us to keep things organized and not get too overwhelmed when your site has thousands and thousands of images. And we also rename the images to match the keywords that they both either use the keyword or they're descriptive, and we write alt tags as well for all of them at that phase. So the upload phase has a pretty decent image optimization happening at the same time. So that's the upload phase, really. Like, it's not too bad.
And then to finish off is the publish phase. And I know a lot of people think this is just click publish, and it is. But there's a few extra things happen at this point.
We can talk 5 minutes about it.
There's a few extra things happen at this point. But first I want to talk about a question we get a lot, which is, should you publish in batches or just throw everything up as soon as it's ready? And typically we're in favor of putting up as soon as it's ready. But what often happens is we end up publishing like 5 articles at the same time, just because as things are coming through our process, when it comes to like the editor, the SEO person, they tend to just batch their work. They're not doing it as soon as something comes through. They'll do it every 2-3 days. So inevitably they come in small batches. But I'm a big proponent of just publishing it as soon as possible, even if you've got a new site. It gets out there faster, and it gets it to index and age. Yeah. So when you hit publish, first thing, go check the actual live version, because often there'll be some mistake or something won't have worked or some image will have broken, and just go have a visual look, read through it, and make sure it's working fine. Add it to your rank tracker. So whatever you're using for that, add the keyword and any variations you're targeting to there, so you can keep an eye on it as well. And then this is the point when you want to do the kind of reverse internal linking. So if there are other pages on your site that you can link from to this one you've just published, then go and find those, add those internal links at this point. It may give it an extra little push. And you can also add it to your external link target list. So if you feel like you're going to need to build some links to it to get it moving, then this is the point to start thinking about that, to start doing that. There are kind of 2 ways to think about this. and it depends how your site's performing. So typically a site will either be in this position where you publish a post and then within a matter of hours or days, you figure out where you're going to rank. It kind of lets you loose. And then for other sites, typically newer sites or lower authority sites, you're publishing something and it can be 6 months plus before you seem to even stand a chance of ranking and of being considered. So depending on which mode you're in will depend on the kind of priority of where you want to be pushing link building for that, I would say. Anything else to add on publishing, or is that it?
No, not really. The really important stuff is submit it in Webmasters Console so it's indexed faster.
Yeah.
So like we do that. It's like if your site has enough authority, it should be indexed pretty fast. If you are a new site, expect to wait a while. That's just how Google works, but it just helps. Sometimes like on sites that are a bit older and bigger, like it will make you rank significantly earlier by doing this. So I would do that as well.
If you have a content promotion process and you're big on social and all that, obviously this is the point.
That's what you do then, yeah.
Kick off that. But to be honest, we very rarely do that. Just because
I think we should share our content better. I think we don't do a good job on social for that. But also it's important to understand that social sharing drives some traffic, but unless you have really a big following, it's also like not that big of a deal, For most people who do sites the way I think they do, it doesn't matter that much unless you do Pinterest and you're big there. Maybe
it's also not as good as it used to be because the algorithms favor just different types of content, paid content. You share stuff on your Facebook page and hardly any of your organic followers actually see it.
You need to create content for the platforms. Like you need to create content that will be popular on Facebook, etc. And it's like it's not really the same as your SEO content that's targeting an evergreen keyword or something. So it's unlikely that this kind of article will do extremely well on Facebook. I mean, if I share an article on Facebook on some sites, we get like 100 clicks or something. Great. But does it really pay the bills at the end of the month? Not really. And it's kind of a one-off 100 thing. So it's like sometimes we do it. We probably should do it more, but I don't think it's a game breaker anymore, unless you're like a big influencer or something. So yeah, that's pretty much our editorial process post search intent. It's like I'm happy we finally kind of like nailed the way to add value while still playing around search intent. It was something that like, it's often feels like it's just a copy paste game at this point. You can go a little bit deeper than that. And I think that this ability to go deeper over time will become the thing that makes you stand above the crowd, rank higher, etc. And people who will have this ability, like because search intent is still pretty new, like people are just adapting to it, but eventually as it becomes more competitive, I think these little nuances that we try to bring into this podcast will be what makes the difference between all these samey articles that are treating of the same topic. So I would recommend you start implementing this stuff. So hopefully when this becomes more competitive, you are in a good place and you are not losing your rankings, losing traffic, etc. Because I'm telling you, we will hear stories about that when people who have just done copy-paste articles start being outpaced by people who try to push it a little bit deeper. So that's pretty much it for this podcast. If you guys enjoy it, don't forget to subscribe, like, drop us a comment, tell us what you want us to talk about next. We are off to Portugal with Mark now. I can't wait. I'm so happy. The winter has been long. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode. Bye.